We're now in a time where the quality of work is judged by innovation, creativity, problem solving. So the best way to do that, if you look at any research, is through incredible, productive teams.
Welcome to Powrup, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts Nat and Kristen as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes. Hello, thanks for listening. Today we're chatting all about team building. Don't hit the skip button. We can hear you groan and rolling your eyes, but we're on a mission to make them lovable. We're also on a mission to give you the tools and the confidence to build a career on your terms. Check us out at Powrsuit.com. Team building. Nat, why the cringe factor?
I reckon there's two.
Yeah.
One, if you don't like your colleagues, if you don't like your workplace, and you're sort of like,
why do I want to spend time with these people?
Why do I want to spend time with them? And that's often a fake understanding because you just haven't spent that much time around them. And that, to me, that one boils down to inauthentic, if you feel like the organization is being inauthentic with team building. And the second one that I've experienced is for introverts who are just like...
You're forcing people to do often really uncomfortable things. And, we've done startups, that's our history. And so you have a lot of developers who are traditionally on the introverted side of the scale. And you say team building to them. Oh, gosh. It's a problem. It's a problem. Especially because we're extroverts. And we're the leaders that are trying to convince people that's going to be so fun.
So fun. Have you had any massive fails in team building?
We're going to talk about fails. We're going to talk about three things today. The first is why bother?
Mm-hmm.
The second is... we're going to talk about fails.
Oh, great.
The third is we're going to share some ideas on a budget. And I want to test you on a few that we might consider for Powrsuit.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for doing team building on a budget.
Yeah. So the goal today is actually to share some lovable ideas on a budget, because we know that budgets are being tightened and it's really important that we still do this stuff for a few reasons. So maybe that helps guide us into why bother with it in the first place.
I think it's more important now than absolutely ever before because we live in a knowledge economy and we've moved on from the days where we were all at production lines and it really didn't matter how motivated you were or not. You had one task to do and you did it. We're now in a time where the quality of work is judged by innovation, creativity, problem solving. So the best way to do that, if you look at any research, is through incredible, productive teams. If you're not investing in creating those teams, and even if you still are living in a world of the, what do we call them? The unicorns, the superstars, the idea of strong individual contributors and really highlighting them over the power of teams, you're probably missing the mark a bit on what you can achieve.
Yeah, knowledge economy. I would add purpose-driven economy. More than ever, we're attracted to environments that are for purpose. And purpose can align with profit as well. But at the end of the day, we want to go in and find meaning in our work. We want to have an impact on the world, and we want to feel connected to the mission of that organization. And so humans are purpose driven, and we want to feel that in work. We spend so much time at work. When you are in a purpose driven environment, that connection, that collaboration, that communication is ever more so important so that we are not only connected to one another, but the organization.
And I think the third thing is empathy. That if we're wanting to move into flexible, hybrid, creative work styles, one of the easiest ways to build strong teams is to understand the wider context of each other's lives. It's very easy, and I'm sure we've all been guilty of this, where someone's behaving maybe not at their best or they're sounding a bit frazzled, to realize that work is just part of our lives. So really getting to know people as humans and knowing what else is happening in their lives helps us realize that sometimes it may not be a good time to chase someone for something, or it might be a good time to just say, hey, take a day off or have a bit of time to yourself, because I think we should all know well and truly by now that gluing yourself to your desk for 40 hours a week is not always the best way to get the best outcomes at work.
Yeah, I love empathy, because that's that idea of what actually is it like in that other person's shoes? What is their perspective? And sometimes that actually takes getting to know the human, which is really hard to find to get to know in a 9 to 5 context when you are constantly working on deliverables, there's deadlines, there's metrics that you need to hit, and it's really tough to kind of break that naturally, like in the lunchroom or over a coffee or now in this hybrid work.
Those quick snatches of time.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've experienced this too, but for me, getting to know people really well as friends or as like, professional friends, however far your relationship goes, means that in those crunch times, those times where you're sort of getting on each other's nerves or something isn't working, it actually changes your entire mindset to it. Rather than seeing them as a work person, you build that trust and that belief that they have the best intentions, and so you just kind of come at problems from a very different way, and it's so much nicer.
Or get a sense of, I think we were chatting with someone the other day who said they'd worked with someone for an entire year before they realized that person had kids. And when you take that deliberate time out for work, you just can speed up those connections really quickly and get a sense of the whole person, because we're no longer this like leave home and now you're the work person, and leave work and now you're the home person. We're actually bringing ourselves to work.
Absolutely.
Which is...
And I think there was I fell in love with a man on LinkedIn this week who is smashing the patriarchy from a man's perspective, which is so cool. But he talked a lot about that within the patriarchy, a lot of men feel like they have to leave their home life at home and they can't talk about their kids at work, and they have these compartmentalized times. And I mean, we've heard of a person who apologized for a man who apologized for taking time off because his child was in hospital because it just didn't feel like he was allowed. Building that empathy, understanding the wider life is a really nice way to have these cohesive teams.
And I loved this idea of connect your team building activity to the problem you're trying to solve, or the purpose even. So that looks like, are you trying to solve or foster communication? There's probably a whole set of activities under that. We can chat about that. Are you looking to boost morale? Then you might be looking for something a bit light, a bit that, everyone can have fun.
Surfing.
Yeah. Are you looking to problem solve? Because there's, again, really specific activities for problem solving. Or breaking the ice. Are you actually getting to know new members on the team and looking to get to know each other? So I think under those 4 categories, if you're really clear about what you're trying to solve, what you're trying to foster, you can actually align and match team building under those banners, and it won't feel so forced and disconnected from the workplace.
Yeah, and that's often when I was talking at the start about that non-genuine team building, that's why it misses the mark, right? Because it feels like someone from on high has rolled out whatever it is, and it's just misses the mark. It's not what people want. It actually un-team builds, because as you spend your whole time feeling a real disconnect between you and the organization, doesn't feel like you cared about it all because they didn't actually think about what you wanted. And so really understanding what the purpose of team building is a really nice way. And it's really easy to ask, right? Like, it's quite easy to send out a quick survey, quick show of hands on which thing do we think we need to work on the most at the moment as an organization. Takes a bit of vulnerability, but as you get into the habit of it, it feels way less scary.
Okay, speaking of vulnerable and scary, let's talk about fails. Do you have any fails in your experience, or have you read of any?
The biggest fail, which wasn't really a team building, but it kind of was with our customers. Remember back at Hatch, we decided to start a book club. And so we chose Rich Dad, Poor Dad first. Yes. And one of our co-founders and me I endured that book. It was painful to read, but I got through it because I was committed to this book club. We had a video call, because I think this was during COVID times, where everyone was going to tune in. And it was you, me, and Jared, our other wonderful co-founder. We're the only ones who tuned in.
No one came in.
But we actually, the hilarious thing about that is we ended up having an amazing time, and Jared and I were spitballing all the things we learned, and you were laughing, and it was actually really fun. So that was the biggest fail I remember. Okay. But I think I've always worked in organizations that I really love, and so I most of the time, even a shared morning tea, it sort of goes down well because you like each other. But I've been struggling to think of fails. I'll probably think of some more, but why don't you kick into some of yours, and I'll probably
one of the
something.
Biggest fails I've seen is when I heard an organization, actually I witnessed this email, that they called their social club, which is a form of team bonding and getting together. In New Zealand, it's really, in Australia, it's very common to have Friday afternoon drinks. Or you might have an event to celebrate, I don't know, Halloween or Christmas or whatever. And they called their social club Culture Club. And I have a really big issue with that, because we are talking about team building, which, yes, can involve socializing, but it is one tiny, tiny well, it does involve socializing, one tiny aspect of culture. Like culture is the values you set.
I agree.
The behavior you bring to work. It is all the things we do at work, how we treat one another, the purpose we're aligned to, how we're kind of in this thing together, and team building and socialization is the tiniest aspect of kind of either celebration or connecting. And I just found that really
It's missing the
weird.
mark, right? That's
Yeah.
the example of a company that's quite clearly showing they didn't quite get it.
Yeah.
And words matter. I think we both agree words matter.
Yeah.
And culture is a loaded word for a reason. And flippantly using that really undermines some of the really, really key parts of it.
Yeah.
No, that's a...
I thought that was
that's
a fail. That was a fail. And the other one, I think, is when I hear about this concept of competition, I think competition for
Oh god,
really young...
you're the first to sign up. Kristen's like, give me 3 spots.
Yes, I will. Like board game night, that was a lot of fun. We're going to chat about some of our ideas. But competition can be really dangerous because not everyone feels comfortable in that scenario. Chatting about introverts maybe not feeling comfortable getting up for an improv night, if that happens to be your team building activity. Let's talk about those that hate competition. And now you're doing weird foot races or weird stuff. And
although I've got to say, one
Yeah.
of the wins, I remember way back at when we first started out at Hatch, and we were in a corporate, and they had a Winter Olympics night, and it was all very competitive.
That was
so
fun.
because it was fun competition. They turned all the Winter Olympic sports into, I can't even remember what they were. It was like a
it's
hula
probably-
hoop versus a whatever, and it was
racing the chairs across the
Yeah.
office. Okay, that was fun.
I'm a huge fan of cheesy. Like, I love cheese. I'm a huge fan of it, but like that
Okay.
stuff where it's creative and fun and it helps people, because I think sometimes we can take ourselves a bit too seriously. So stuff like that,
Yes.
dream.
Yeah, no,
dream.
that was a great time. So many laughs, which is really important. But this one in particular that I saw on LinkedIn, okay, it wasn't team building, but this just goes to show the culture of this company. It was Goldman Sachs in America, and it was to get an internship position. Have you seen this viral video?
Oh no.
This guy, in order for them to hire the last intern into Goldman Sachs, you had to run a 1,600-meter race, so 1.6 kilometers, and drink 4 beers while doing so.
That's like
and
hazing at.
Yeah.
Oh,
And this
no.
guy wrote this whole thing saying why he's not mediocre and he won, and only serious people are going to get this internship positions, people that are able to do this thing. And he was genuine about it, and not only was he genuine about it, he got the friggin' job. And you should just see the
my
comments.
goodness. Well, that's
crazy.
the downside of privilege, right? It makes all the reasons why you succeeded invisible, because no one wants to feel like they've been given a massive head start.
Again, while it wasn't team building, how indicative is that of that culture? So if your activities are not...
I wonder if the job entails sprinting, because
Honestly.
maybe there is a lot of sprinting required, but to me that feels like a
Honestly.
very odd criteria to hire
So
someone.
competition, be a bit careful. I think there's some obvious rules, like, is it inclusive? We learned very quickly to take things out of the bar, because that often is after work activities. And if you've got parents that need to go pick up children, that's not inclusive. Secondly, drinking, not everyone drinks.
Although the other thing
Yeah.
I reckon that we learned a lot though is that not everyone has to do everything, because one of the risks with team
Yes.
building is it becomes mediocre and boring for everyone, versus saying we're going to do 5 things and we're going to have some, which is what you put in place as well, some informal things and some formal things. And the formal things we try and do in work time, and we expect everyone to come, and we've really put thought into it. Informal things we keep an eye on to make sure that there's not just a 10 to everyone going to the bar and people missing out, because that is where women unfairly get disadvantaged.
Yeah.
But it's actually okay if people want to do it as
Yes.
well. It's not saying no, you must be inclusive or optimally inclusive on everything, because that becomes, you spiral to a hole.
No, totally agree, which is... Speaking of some of those, if we just move into some ideas on a budget.
I want to focus on fails more. I'm trying to think of some.
Some more fails.
I'm sure there's been so many. I actually should have done a poll before
Well,
this.
okay,
but
this isn't on a
maybe
budget.
you won with the 1,600 meter sprint.
Well, this wasn't on a budget, but we did do surfing for a day, and that was something that a few of us enjoyed.
That was not inclusive.
Enjoyed a surf. I'll say it was a little bit of a fail because 2 people on our team couldn't even swim.
And I, with my issue, I have really stumpy arms. My body to arm ratio, and when Kristen made us go out surfing, and the instructor was by me for about half an hour, being like, just pop, And by the end, even he was like, I don't think you're physically able to do this. And I was like, I'm going to the beach.
Okay, so there are a few people up on the sand.
But we had a
eating
great
and
time
not
on
drowning.
the sand. Our director
Great.
of design brought
Great.
pastries. And so as people gave up on Kristen's surfing dream, we just all gathered on the
But
beach
can
and
I
had
just
a great
say,
time.
those introvert developers, they loved it.
They loved it.
Oh, they loved it. So
it.
look, it was a win fail. Let's just leave it at that.
Oh, I thought it was a win. I
Okay.
think it was great. And also it was creative and it was different. And I think one of the great things about team building, which we've doing these pilots over the last couple of weeks, and a CEO of a company we worked with said, we should push ourselves out of our comfort zones because that is kind of part of it. And not too far, maybe not 1,600 meter sprints, but a little bit out of your comfort zone where you might fail a little bit or you might have to work together is actually kind of the optimal dream, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
And then I think we've mentioned introverts a little bit, even though I am an introvert sometimes. I think one of the things that I've really struggled with introverts, as someone who's quite loud, is I actually don't often know what works. I think games nights work quite nicely when you've got an activity and you can. But there is often, if you are an introvert leader, it may be a good idea if you want to send us some ideas. We'll share them.
Yeah.
But because the sort of general consensus is that loud people talk the most, you sort of end up and you can ask for written ideas and all that sort of stuff. But I tend to find I don't get as many from introverts when I put the call out. So I'd love to hear what some ideas are.
Great. All right. We are going to move on to some ideas on a budget, stuff that's worked for us, and some ideas to share with all of you. And if you've got any ideas as well, please do share them. We're happy to put those out on our socials. Now, the first is, you had mentioned the informal. And the first thing we did at Hatch was we had people connect. First of all, we gave ownership to our people to create something themselves, because socializing and bonding and relationships, everyone should have ownership over that, which again adds to the culture of a place and me wanting to come in. One of our values at that time was related to fun. We wanted this, doing a startup is a really hard thing. And so for us, we were deliberate about having that value, and we wanted to have a good time doing the thing, which meant everyone had to take ownership of that word, of that value. So what that meant was we had someone who loved sourdough. And so every Thursday morning, we all took turns, whoever was in sourdough society, not everyone had to, but we took turns bringing a piece of bread in, rating it, and we subsequently voted on the best sourdough bread maker of the city, which was quite fun. That was cool.
And then other people started bringing in their own baking, and then you just uncover the level of nerding you can do over sourdough.
I know, all
Remember
the SCOTY, what's it called?
Disgusting. But then the different types of butter you pair with the different types of sourdough.
Yes.
But that was amazing. That was
great.
super fun. And
Our
that didn't come
Jog
from any
Squad
of the leaders.
went okay for a while. So
Jog
for those
Squad
that
was
wanted
amazing.
to stay after the bread, we thought we should probably work off some of the bread. So probably every Wednesday we had a little running club, which was
counterproductive exercises where we'd do a lot of eating, and then we were laughing at Jog Squad. I remember years ago, someone was like, people must see us out here every week and be like, these are the only jogging club that seems to constantly be putting on weight.
That's so true.
Remember we pivoted from Jog Squad though to Booty Camp,
yes.
because one of our amazing engineers, his brother was a personal trainer, so we hired him to come and train us.
Force us to do push-ups in the park.
He was hilarious. He was like, today we're doing butt stuff, and we were like, no.
No, that was great. And you had mentioned earlier games night, and that was in the evening, but it was really cool to see those people that love games that might not necessarily have joined us at Booty Club, but they joined us at games night and brought all sorts of board games I'd never played before.
Yeah.
Talk about competition. I loved it.
The other one, and this isn't always possible with remote teams, but we found as we came out of lockdown and you weren't quite back into office mode, and that people would start to have small working groups just at their house. And for some reason, even that of just sitting around in a different environment together and working, it was free, it was during work hours, and it just created this different vibe. Yeah. And I know, again, our director of design used to start to have people over for lunch, and she'd just have one person and they'd have a nice lunch at her house and stuff like that. That's just you're getting to know each other, you're getting to see each other's homes, you don't have to do it, but it just creates these little hubs outside of this formal office environment.
Yeah. If you're looking to foster collaboration and cross-functional collaboration in your team, one idea that came to mind, I don't know if you were there that evening, but we did, or that afternoon actually, but we did cake decorating. Do you remember that?
No, I missed that.
Okay, so
Sadly, because I would have won.
It was interesting.
Everything's a competition, right?
But we split into groups, and it was people that you wouldn't normally work with. We all had items, and so you can just go to the grocery store and get some budget cake decorating items, random stuff, and we each created kind of a section of the cake or small cakes, and then that was kind of a fun activity to work with other people, which seemed to work well. What else on collaboration?
Well, I've never done this, but I know a lot of people rave about it, the volunteering for a charity, and that is like often it's a day or a half day. And I know recently my girlfriend went to, I think it was a really cool food charity where they get all the leftovers from supermarkets and stuff and create these amazing meals, which then people pay to come and eat that night. But you're now working on a different task together, and I've been thinking a lot about this week with this topic of building empathy and team building is sometimes getting out of your existing roles and seeing other strengths people have or different ways they problem solve. And so I have done it before, tree planting, going and doing some tree planting or cooking, or there's just some incredible nonprofits who would get a lot of benefit. And I know there's other stuff you can do. You can donate money and there's other helpful ways, but there's
Beach
something
cleanups.
really cool about that.
Yes, I love that. On the topic of ice breaking, and you had mentioned this one in developing our newsletter this week, was a bit love-hate, and that was shared lunches, aka potlucks. Now, I love them because I love food, and they generally work out, but the purpose that we held a couple potlucks, shared lunches, was because of the ice-breaking problem to solve, and that was we'd hired a ton of people over lockdown. We'd never met them in person, which is so crazy. It was about 25 people we'd hired, had never met. So what a perfect way to meet up in a room and have everyone bring a dish. We asked people to bring a dish that was something they reminded them of their childhood. So it gives you a sense, and of course they had to share where they were born and why this dish.
And we found out that, I mean, what was it? Well over 50% of people had born outside of New Zealand. You actually didn't even realise where half the people had been born.
Yeah, and then you get to get a sense of the vegans, the vegetarians, the cultural dishes that are important to them. And even though there's a little bit of grumbling from the introverts, I mean, who doesn't love food? So I thought for an ice-breaking event, it worked.
I loved it.
Yeah.
And anyone who isn't from New Zealand who's listening, my favourite dish contribution was in New Zealand, we often will have a bun with a bit of shredded chicken and some coleslaw at a shared lunch, and someone brought that along, and it was just hilarious. I think it was just such a classic, like, you forget the normal foods in different countries and how they are different.
Yeah.
So I think
there was
really
one shared lunch fail though, when the instructions probably weren't clear and everybody brought dessert. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, but I'm fine with that. But I think the thing with shared lunch, what I've heard the criticisms of them are, it's another task that normally women take on. So I think there's a couple of rules for them that work really well. One is they don't actually always have to be something you bring from home. Like, another easy way to do it is everyone chucks a bit of money in a pot and you get something brought in, pizzas or whatever. You could do something like that. The second thing is you don't have to make it. It's because there used to be, I know when I grew up, there was a real stigma around people who bought things from the supermarket. Who cares? Just bring what you can bring.
Yeah.
And also, I believe with team building, there should always be an opt-out clause of, if it's just not going to work for you, if you're frazzled, your team's got you this time.
Yeah.
And so I think there's ways around it. And also maybe the frequency, like we did them every now and again, but we didn't do them all the time.
Right.
One thing I would say though, on the shared thing, is often the cakes and stuff for birthdays. I've realized now since starting Powrsuit how often that falls on the woman in the office.
Yeah,
so if you are a leader, make sure you share that stuff around, or have a way that it's not all falling on you, because that's the last thing you want to end up in, is more burden.
That reminded me of a past workplace that I was a part of, and I was relatively new to New Zealand, and I didn't realize that it was customary here on your birthday, you have to shout, meaning you have to provide morning snacks.
Is that not normal around the world?
No, that's ridiculous. I'm like, it is
I've never done it because my birthday's the 4th of January.
Right. So I just moved from Canada and I was like, I'm just going to introduce everyone to Canadian treats. And so the night before my birthday, I'm making fudge and I was making bacon. I was making all this candied bacon. I went over the top. Everyone loved it, but I felt really grumbly because I was like, why am I doing this on my birthday?
I know, you're
this
like,
is
it's
ridiculous.
my birthday. But those things,
was a
it's
bit
always the nuance of them, right? It's
Yeah.
it's thinking it through. It's not just making assumptions. It's just going, what would work? And that could easily be as well a survey of like,
Yeah.
do you want to do shared lunches or not? Like
Yeah.
we always underestimate the power of just asking people if it works.
So I want to chat about problem solving. Actually, I'm going to force you to chat about problem solving ideas because we have done a couple things called either a form of a hackathon and or a design jam. So do you want to share that?
Yeah, should I do that? And then maybe you can talk about the big culture stuff. So a lot of people in tech have heard of the concept of a hackathon, and that's where that's when a bunch of people come together, and they're not just engineers and designers, it's anyone. And I've done a few gov hacks and startup hacks where you come together for a defined amount of time. It could be a day, it could be a couple of days, it could be half a day at an office, a couple of hours even, and you basically pick a problem you want to solve. So one of the problems I solved at a gov hack once was, how can we use the statistics? You know how governments collect a whole lot of statistics around their people. How might we use these more creatively? Set aside an afternoon. There's a bit of prep involved, as always, to set the problem, to set a bit of a structure. And I think in our newsletter this week, we have a link to an article that really explains how to do a design jam.
Great.
It can be hackathon or design jam, I don't really care what it's called. You bring people in and they work together to solve that problem or do that thing. The two things that I really like to do in those, firstly, is a really fun creative challenge. So we mentioned in our newsletter, that's how we came up with the first iteration of our Hatch t-shirts, by getting a bunch of people in a room. And you might be thinking, how do you do that if I'm not a designer? You don't need to be a designer to draw some really rough ideas. Designers can take them away and flesh them out, but
Cool.
What is your concept? The second thing that I really loved is when you work in a company or an organization, there's often these real annoying things. Like it could be the way you structured your email, or it could be a little annoying thing in the way you do this product, or it could be you've got this really disorganized filing system. Whatever it is, it's never prioritized because it's never business critical. You can take one of those things and there's just this like, we're finally addressing some of that annoying stuff.
Yeah.
So I think this is a great opportunity for people to just share the things that really annoy them, and you have an afternoon of solving them, and everyone can put on different hats and try different things. You got a fixed time. If it's not solved in that time, you're not necessarily committing to continuing it on. So it really forces creative thinking.
Often for the cost of some pastries or pizza or something.
Yeah. And again, it's that recognition of, we're not trying to whip you to get as much out of you in a 40-hour week as possible. We're trying to really facilitate a creative environment.
Yeah, great. What did you mean by big culture stuff before?
I'm thinking about the example of when we had grown so quickly at Hatch. And,
Yes.
and I think a lot of the time you get really nervous when you know things are wobbly and
Yeah.
you know the culture's got a few things, or you're hearing a few grumbles, to just say, let's address this head on. And I think you did a great job with that.
Well,
So-
this was the ownership piece, in that we all have to own our cultural values, and we knew we weren't quite hitting the mark. And so we hired a facilitator, which for one day wasn't that expensive. And we got into a room, which was in the office, and we just said, we think what will solve the problem is, one, you being heard. And I think for that session, we stepped out, the founders stepped out. But the second was, over to you now. And the solution we felt was we were probably missing a value. And so we were quite vulnerable as a leadership team, business critical stuff here. However, for ownership, you have to give this stuff over. And so the purpose for that session was, you come up with what this value is, which was balance. And then they came up with all ideas of how that should be exhibited, which actually solved a lot of the issues that people were having at the time. Which was great.
And also, I think there was a couple of big things I got out of it. Firstly was, it's amazing how easy it is to have assumptions. And I think a lot of this new team had assumed we knew the problems.
Yeah.
And we assumed we knew the problems. And some of the things that came out was this massive amount of stress that people felt about answering Slack in the weekend, that we had no idea, because we'd been merrily doing it for a year and a half.
Yeah.
We're online 24/7, to go, oh my goodness, no, we have never set in place a policy for this. Let's do that. So very easy wins, which I think was really cool. The second thing is, as leaders, our job is often to connect the dots, or to allow people to connect the dots. And when people see your values on a wall or in a document, they're still like, oh, nice. And we've all got a lot of baggage around them. And providing an opportunity for people, I think they went around in groups and went, how in my role could I best display this value? And it was really incredible what came out with people going, oh, when we answer a phone call, this is how I could take ownership of the problem. Or, oh, when I turn up at work and I feel something's going wrong, this is how I can blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I think that to me was a real cool way of going, people know how to solve their own problems. And as leaders, our job is to create that environment. And that is team building. Sometimes we think we put it in a different box, but the team came out stronger, and I think they had built trust with us that we were willing to try and solve those things, and we recognized we hadn't got it perfect, and that we understood there were some broken bits that needed fixing. So that is a very powerful tool, and it feels scary at the start because you don't know what's going to come out. It's not in your control, but that's kind of the job.
Agreed. Okay, we're going to end a little bit differently today, and I have got some low budget options that I'm going to test you on for team building. Are we going to implement this at Powrsuit when we build our team or not? So you can do a couple of quick thoughts or a yes or no, and then we're going to close out. So for the first one, is we're going to take everyone to a lower tier sports game. What I mean by that is not the New Zealand All Blacks where tickets are $200 a piece, but quite often local games, you can get really cheap tickets to A-League football or whatever that soccer, whatever that might be. But how about that for an afternoon activity?
Yes.
Okay. How about a hike?
Maybe, depending on who's in our team, because that's not always available for everyone. Like, that's not always an option.
Okay. How about hosting a watch party?
What's a watch party?
Well, whatever.
Are you selling us
could
watches?
Be Oscars. It could be the final episode of Succession.
Yes.
Great. Barbecue at my house.
Yes.
Barbecue at your house.
No.
You have to clean.
Yes. We love barbecues at our house, or dinner parties. Yeah, great.
Painting party.
No, but mainly because I think they're overdone, and it's sort of a go-to, and it's just a bit lame now. Great. Sorry, because I know there's some wonderful companies that do it, but I've just done too many.
Great. Pottery.
Maybe. That if you can do it in a day, great. But anything that's going to take a long time.
I'm a big no on it, by the way, because my mum was a potter and used me as child labor, so that's out. But I just thought I'd ask you. Volunteer day, we talked about that.
Yes.
Geocaching or geocaching.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, again, depending on everyone's. But actually, I've done that before, and there's some really accessible places. How fun. Yes.
Final one, SPCA Pets Day. They come to you. They bring their pets.
I've had pets at the office.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Dangerous. Very dangerous.
Because you take one home.
Everyone takes one home, and then suddenly no one can come into work anymore.
Very good. Well, we hope we left all of you with ideas for team building on a budget. And we'd love to hear what yours are. So feel free to connect with us. Check out powrsuit.com. Connect with us on socials. Please give us 5 stars.
And follow us.
And follow us. Yeah. And we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.